"Trust me," he said, and that's where it all began. I remember the exact moment, the way he looked at me with this strange mix of seriousness and something I couldn't quite name, something that made my stomach twist in ways I hadn't felt before. I had known him for years, casually at first, classmates in high school who drifted apart and then reconnected as adults. He wasn't a stranger, but that day, he felt like one. There was a weight in his words, and I, for reasons I can't fully explain, decided to believe him. It started on an ordinary Thursday. I had been trudging through my routine, everything mechanical and predictable, and then he appeared at my door with that enigmatic smile. "I've got something you need to see," he said, and without waiting for my answer, he pushed past me into my small apartment. I wanted to protest, to say he couldn't just barge in, but something in his eyes stopped me. There was a sincerity there, or at least I told myself there was, and before I knew it, I was following him into a room I didn't recognize in my own apartment. He had set up this little space with mirrors and lights and clothes I didn't recognize, dresses, skirts, blouses, things that were soft and delicate and completely alien to my usual wardrobe. I froze, staring at them, a nervous laugh escaping me. "What is all this?" I asked. He just smiled again, calm, patient, almost gentle in a way that made my heart race. "I think it's time you saw a different side of yourself," he said, and I laughed nervously, thinking he was joking. But there was no joke in his eyes. I wanted to say no, to walk out and close the door on whatever strange impulse had brought him here, but something about him made me hesitate. He had this way of making you feel safe even when you didn't feel safe at all, and that, somehow, was scarier than anything else. "Come on," he urged softly, "just try. Trust me." I don't know what made me agree. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe the sheer exhaustion of my own predictable life, maybe some secret part of me that wanted to break free but didn't know how. I let him guide me through it. He pulled out a soft blouse and held it to me, and I laughed again, half out of disbelief, half out of nervous excitement. "I can't wear that," I said. He shook his head. "You'll be surprised. Just try." And I did. Hesitantly, awkwardly, fumbling with buttons and zippers, I slipped into something I had never imagined myself wearing. The fabric felt strange against my skin, soft and light, but as I looked into the mirror he had set up, I saw myself differently. Not completely, not yet, but a flicker of something unfamiliar and thrilling stirred inside me. He smiled at me from behind, not in a mocking way, not in a judgmental way, but like he could see something I couldn't yet see myself. "Now the hair," he said. I froze. "What?" I asked. "We need to finish the look. Trust me." There was that phrase again, the one that had pulled me in and wouldn't let me go. I let him guide me to the chair, let him brush and style my hair in ways I had only ever seen in movies. The reflection staring back at me made my heart pound. It was still me, but not quite me. Something had shifted, imperceptibly at first, like a secret had been uncovered that I didn't know I was keeping from myself. We spent hours that night transforming me. Layers of clothing, brushes of makeup, adjustments here and there, until the person in the mirror was both frightening and thrilling. He had a patience I couldn't understand, explaining every movement, every brushstroke, every little adjustment like it mattered more than anything else in the world. And maybe it did, because when it was done, I didn't just look different, I felt different. My reflection wasn't just a stranger, it was a version of myself I hadn't dared to imagine, a version that made me want to breathe deeper, to stand taller, to confront the parts of me I had hidden even from myself. "See," he said quietly. "You didn't know you could look like this. You didn't know you could feel like this." I wanted to argue, to say this wasn't me, but deep inside, I couldn't. Something had shifted, some quiet corner of my identity had been illuminated, and it scared me more than I could admit. "I don't know if I can," I whispered, voice shaking. He reached out, just a hand on my shoulder, steadying, grounding. "You can. You just have to let yourself." That night changed everything. I couldn't sleep afterward, not because I was scared, but because my mind kept replaying the reflection in the mirror. I couldn't stop thinking about how it had felt to see myself differently, to inhabit a version of me that I had never allowed to exist. The next day, everything felt off, or maybe I felt off in everything. My routines seemed smaller, more constricted. I avoided mirrors, avoided reflections, yet in the quiet moments, I could still feel that other me, waiting just beneath the surface. He came over again the next weekend, and without a word, I found myself letting him guide me once more. This time it was easier, more fluid. I slipped into the clothes, the hair, the makeup, and I watched the reflection in the mirror without fear. I was still me, but a different me, and I didn't hate it. I couldn't hate it. There was a vulnerability there I had never allowed, a fragility that was also strength. Days turned into weeks, and what had started as a strange experiment became a secret ritual. I didn't tell anyone. My friends, my family, they had no idea. It became my private world, a hidden space where I could explore without judgment, without consequence. And yet, the more I explored, the more I understood myself. I began to recognize traits in the mirror that I had always denied. Confidence I had never let myself express, sensitivity I had hidden, joy I had overlooked. Each transformation was a revelation, a confession to myself, a confrontation with my own identity. It wasn't always easy. There were moments of panic, moments where I questioned everything: what was real, what was performative, what was just me playing dress up. But he was always there, steady, patient, reminding me to breathe, reminding me that this was a journey, not a performance. Trust me, he would say, and each time, I felt a little braver, a little more willing to confront myself. One evening, as the sun was setting, casting a warm glow through the apartment, I looked into the mirror and realized something profound. I wasn't hiding anymore, not entirely. I wasn't pretending. I wasn't just the person the world expected me to be. I was someone more. Someone whole. And I owed it to him, in a way, to trust him and, more importantly, to trust myself. It's funny, thinking back, how simple it all seemed at first. A few words, a gentle insistence, a hand guiding me into a new world. But it wasn't simple. It was terrifying, exhilarating, humbling, and transformative. I learned courage I didn't know I had, acceptance I hadn't offered myself before, and a deeper understanding of identity that went beyond labels, beyond appearances. Even now, months later, I still carry that reflection with me. Not always in the mirror, not always in the clothes or the makeup, but in the way I walk, the way I hold myself, the quiet confidence that comes from knowing yourself fully, even the parts you once tried to hide. He was right, I did trust him. And that trust didn't just lead me to a transformation of appearance, it led me to a transformation of self, a reclamation of who I was all along. Trust me, he had said. And I did. And my life has never been the same. After that first evening, a strange rhythm entered my life. I found myself anticipating his visits, not in a way that felt desperate, but in a quiet, trembling sort of excitement. Every time the doorbell rang, my heart would skip, my palms would sweat, and I would wonder what new version of myself I would meet tonight. The world outside remained the same, dull and mechanical, but in my apartment, I had discovered a hidden dimension, a secret universe where I could explore myself without fear, without judgment. And yet, even as I reveled in this, a small, nagging voice inside me whispered doubts. One night, as he carefully applied the final touches of makeup, adjusting the eyeliner with the precision of an artist, I found myself asking the question I had avoided from the very start. Do you ever wonder who I really am? If this is all just pretending? His hands froze for a brief moment, and I felt the weight of his gaze on me, not judging, not amused, but piercing, intense, almost unreadable. Who you really are, he said softly, isn't what you wear or how you look. It's what you're brave enough to accept about yourself. And right now, you're braver than you've ever been. I didn't know what to say to that. I had never thought of bravery in this context. I had always associated it with boldness in public, with achievements, with outward confidence. But sitting there, in that chair, feeling the brush sweep across my cheeks, I realized bravery could also mean letting yourself exist fully, even when it frightened you. It could mean letting someone see you in ways you had hidden from the world, even from yourself. The weeks that followed became a dance of discovery and fear. Some days, I would wake up and feel completely myself, ordinary and grounded, and the thought of transformation would make me anxious. Other days, I craved it, needed it almost desperately, like a secret hunger I didn't know I had. I began keeping a small notebook, jotting down my feelings, the way my body felt, the way my thoughts shifted when I looked in the mirror. I wrote about the quiet panic in my chest when I first put on a skirt, the thrill when my hair fell perfectly around my face, the tug of excitement when someone noticed subtle changes in me without realizing why. He was patient through all of it, never pushing, never asking too much, always reminding me that this was my journey. But I knew he was watching me closely, studying the subtle changes in my posture, the way my voice sometimes faltered, the way my eyes lingered on the reflection longer than necessary. I wanted to ask him what he saw in me, but I didn't dare. Some part of me feared the answer, feared that he could see truths I wasn't ready to face. Then, one evening, something happened that shifted everything. He brought a new set of clothes, more elaborate, more delicate, more daring than anything I had tried before. I hesitated. That's too much, I murmured, my voice tight with uncertainty. But he smiled, that calm, knowing smile, and said only, "Trust me." And so I did. I slipped into the new outfit, feeling a wave of unfamiliarity wash over me. The skirt was softer than anything I had ever felt, the blouse delicate, almost fragile. My heart pounded as I examined myself in the mirror. The reflection was no longer just a hint of something hidden, it was bold, alive, impossible to ignore. For the first time, I felt a rush of pride, maybe even joy. My body felt different, but more importantly, my mind felt free. The fear that had once clutched me tightened its grip for only a moment, then released me completely. We sat in silence for a while after that, the only sound the quiet hum of the city outside. I traced my reflection with my eyes, memorizing every detail, and for the first time, I allowed myself to wonder, what if this was who I had been meant to be all along? What if all the years of hiding, of pretending, of suppressing parts of myself, had been leading to this? He reached out, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear, and said softly, almost hesitantly, "You're ready." I looked at him, puzzled. "Ready for what?" I asked. He smiled, a mix of pride and anticipation, and said nothing more. But I felt the weight of those two words settle in me. Ready for what? The question lingered, teasing me, daring me to confront something I hadn't yet dared to name. That night, sleep was impossible. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about mirrors, about clothes, about the fragile, transformative power of trust. I thought about him, about the way he had guided me, about the patience and care he had shown, and about the strange, thrilling connection that had formed between us. I realized I had come to depend on him, not in a shallow, superficial way, but in the quiet, profound way one depends on someone who helps you see yourself for the first time. The next day, I made a decision. I wanted to push further, to explore the edges of this hidden world, to understand how far I could go, how fully I could embrace this part of myself. I wasn't sure what that meant, or how the world would respond, but I knew I had to try. And when he arrived later that evening, I was ready. I welcomed him in without hesitation, without fear. "I'm ready," I said, and he nodded, a quiet acknowledgement passing between us. We spent hours again that night, layering fabrics, experimenting with colors and textures, adjusting hairstyles, trying combinations that seemed absurd at first but gradually began to feel natural. And as I looked in the mirror, something extraordinary happened. I stopped seeing just a reflection. I saw a story, a life, a self that had always existed in fragments but was now coming together. I saw courage. I saw beauty. I saw identity in its most unguarded, purest form. It wasn't all smooth. There were moments of doubt, moments when I questioned everything I was doing, moments when I wanted to flee, to hide, to pretend I had never started this journey. But he was always there, steady and unwavering, a quiet anchor in the chaos of my emotions. He didn't judge me for my hesitation, for my panic, for my self-doubt. He simply reminded me to breathe, to observe, to embrace. And slowly, gradually, the fear began to recede, replaced by something far more powerful, self-acceptance. By the end of that week, I had transformed again, not just in appearance but in spirit. The reflection in the mirror was no longer just a version of me, it was me, wholly and unapologetically. I had crossed a threshold, stepping into a space I had once thought forbidden, and I realized I never wanted to go back. There was too much life here, Too much truth, too much possibility. And as he watched me, eyes gentle, steady, almost reverent, I understood something I hadn't fully grasped before. Transformation isn't about the clothes, or the makeup, or the surface. It's about trust. Trust in another, yes, but more importantly, trust in yourself. The courage to see, to accept, to claim the parts of you that have always existed but have never been allowed to breathe. That night, I finally whispered to him, almost afraid of my own words, "Thank you." He smiled, a faint, knowing smile, and said only, "I told you. Trust me." And in that moment, I realized that my journey was just beginning. After that night, something shifted in my daily life. I began noticing the little things, the way light fell across my apartment, the way mirrors caught angles I had never seen, the subtle sway of my posture when I walked. Each glance at a reflection reminded me of the person I had become, or perhaps the person I had always been underneath the layers of habit and expectation. The transformation wasn't just physical, it had seeped into my mind, into my confidence, into the quiet way I carried myself. But with that awareness came tension. I couldn't let anyone see. Not my co-workers, not my friends, not my family. The secrecy weighed on me. Every day was a balancing act, living one life publicly, another privately. And sometimes, in the quiet moments alone, I felt fear that this fragile, precious version of myself could be discovered, misunderstood, ridiculed. And yet, even fear couldn't stop me from exploring. He became my guide, my anchor, my confidant. Each time he arrived, he would bring new things, delicate scarves, shoes that clicked softly against the floor, skirts that swirled in patterns I had never imagined. He never pushed me past my comfort, but he gently encouraged me to stretch my boundaries. "You're capable of more than you think," he would say, and slowly, I began to believe him. Slowly, I began to believe myself. One evening, he suggested something new. "Let's try a full look tonight," he said. Something bold. I hesitated. Bold wasn't me. Bold scared me. But the way he looked at me, calm, patient, unshakable, made me nod before I even realized it. That night, I changed completely. The reflection in the mirror startled me. It wasn't just a version of me anymore, it was someone alive, vibrant, confident. I ran my hands over the fabric, feeling it as if it were part of me, and when he smiled at me, I saw pride in his eyes, pride not for himself, but for me. Weeks passed, and with each transformation, I discovered more about myself. I realized I had been hiding parts of me my whole life, parts that longed for expression, for freedom, for acknowledgement. Clothes, hair, makeup, they were tools, yes, but they were also keys. Keys to doors I had never dared open. Keys to courage, to joy, to understanding myself in ways I had never imagined. Then one night, as we stood before the mirror together, he said something that froze me. "You're ready to see yourself completely," he said softly. My heart thumped in my chest. Ready for what? I swallowed hard, feeling a mix of anticipation and dread. He didn't elaborate. Instead, he handed me a box, wrapped in soft fabric. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside was the most delicate dress I had ever seen, pale and flowing, with subtle embroidery that caught the light. My breath caught. I can't, I whispered, almost afraid to touch it. He placed a hand on my shoulder, grounding me. "Trust me," he said again. That phrase, once strange and almost unsettling, now felt like a lifeline. I nodded. Slowly, deliberately, I let myself be transformed. Each layer of fabric, each careful adjustment, each brush of hair or touch of makeup was a revelation. When I finally looked in the mirror, I didn't just see a reflection, I saw a person I recognized, but also someone new, someone brave, someone whole. And then it happened. Something I hadn't anticipated. As I examined myself, I felt a surge of emotion, a mix of fear and exhilaration and a profound sense of release. Tears pricked at my eyes. I had been hiding, denying, performing, shrinking myself for so long, and now, in that moment, I felt the truth of who I was shining through. It wasn't the dress, or the hair, or the makeup, it was the courage to be seen, even if only by myself and him. He watched me, silent, patient, giving me space to absorb it all. And when he finally spoke, His voice was quiet, almost reverent. "You see. This is who you've always been." I couldn't speak. I could only nod, letting the emotions wash over me. The fear, the uncertainty, the hesitation, they were all still there, yes, but mingled with something stronger: acceptance, pride, exhilaration. I realized then that transformation isn't a single event. It's a series of moments, small and large, each one requiring trust, each one demanding courage. In the following days, I carried myself differently. The secret rituals continued, yes, but now they were infused with a sense of purpose. I was no longer just exploring, I was claiming myself. I experimented, tried new styles, new looks, sometimes failing, sometimes succeeding, but always learning. And through it all, he was there, steady, encouraging, reminding me to trust, to breathe, to allow myself to exist fully. One afternoon, as I adjusted a skirt in front of the mirror, he said something that made my heart skip. "You're ready for the world to see you," he said. My stomach twisted. The world? Could I? Would I? But deep inside, I felt a spark of courage, a small flame that had been kindled over months of quiet transformation. "Maybe," I whispered, almost to myself. "Maybe I am." And in that moment, I understood the truth I had been avoiding. Transformation isn't about hiding or pretending. It's about trust in another, yes, but more importantly, trust in yourself. The courage to see, to accept, to claim every part of who you are. The willingness to be vulnerable, to step into the unknown, to embrace the fear and let it guide you to freedom. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know how the world would react, how people would judge, how I would navigate the line between the person I had been and the person I was becoming. But for the first time, I didn't care. Because I had discovered something far more important than acceptance from others. I had discovered acceptance from myself. "Trust me," he said once more, and I did. I had trusted him before, and it had led me to transformation. Now, I trusted myself, and it led me to something even greater: the courage to exist fully, unapologetically, and beautifully. That was where it all truly began. In the days that followed, I felt a shift in everything. Not outwardly, no one in the world knew, no one could see the quiet revolution that had taken root inside me, but within, I felt a power I had never experienced. I moved differently, spoke differently, even thought differently. Each reflection in a window or mirror reminded me of who I had become and who I had always been underneath all the layers I had hidden behind. One evening, he arrived with that familiar calmness, carrying yet another set of clothes, but this time I didn't hesitate. I welcomed him in, heart steady, hands sure. "I'm ready," I said, and there was no tremor in my voice. The phrase that had haunted me, "trust me," now felt like a challenge I could meet, a call to step into the fullest version of myself. He smiled, not with surprise or judgment, but with quiet pride, and I felt a warmth bloom in my chest. We worked together as always, layering fabrics, adjusting hair and makeup, crafting an image that was bold and unrestrained. But something was different this time. As I looked in the mirror, I didn't see just a reflection. I saw someone alive, fearless, fully inhabiting their identity. I ran my fingers over the delicate fabrics, over the hair styled to perfection, over the features that once seemed alien, and I realized I wasn't pretending anymore. I wasn't hiding. I was showing myself, embracing myself, claiming myself in a way I had never done before. And then, almost without realizing it, I smiled. Truly smiled. Not the polite, contained smile I wore for the world, but a deep, unguarded smile that came from the core of me. I laughed softly, feeling the sound echo in the empty apartment, and for the first time, I allowed myself to think, maybe even to feel, that I had been missing this part of myself all along. He watched me, quiet, patient, and finally said, "Do you see? You've been here the whole time. I just helped you find the door." I nodded, words unnecessary. I understood. Transformation had never been about him, about the clothes, or the makeup. It had been about trust, yes, but more importantly, about courage, the courage to face myself, to accept myself, to step into a version of life I had always feared existed. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual, sunlight spilling across my room. I looked into the mirror and saw the faint traces of yesterday's transformation, subtle hints, a softness in my expression, a tilt of my shoulders, a spark in my eyes. I realized that the change wasn't in the surface. It was in me. Every step I took now, every thought, every gesture, carried a quiet confidence I had never known. I was stronger, braver, more myself than I had ever been. For weeks, I practiced, experimented, explored. Sometimes alone, sometimes with him. Every day I discovered more about how I moved, how I carried my emotions, how I could exist authentically without fear. There were moments of panic, moments when I questioned everything, but each time, I returned to the mirror, returned to the reflection, and remembered, I had crossed a threshold. There was no turning back. And I didn't want to. Then one day, as I adjusted a scarf in the soft afternoon light, he said something that made my chest tighten with anticipation. "You're ready," he said. My heart pounded. "Ready for what?" I whispered. He smiled, a faint, knowing smile, and said nothing more. But I understood. Ready for the world. Ready to step out, fully, unapologetically. Ready to let the courage I had nurtured in secret spill into every part of my life. I took a deep breath. I stood taller, shoulders back, chin lifted. I didn't know what others would think. I didn't know if the world was ready for me. But I was ready for me. That was enough. And in that quiet moment, looking into the mirror one last time before stepping out, I felt a clarity I had never known. This wasn't a transformation for show, for thrill, or for anyone else. It was a reclamation of myself, a declaration that I had finally allowed all the parts of me to exist freely. "Trust me," he said once more. And this time, I didn't need to. I trusted myself. I had always had to. And now, finally, I could step forward into life fully, completely, and beautifully, carrying the lessons of fear, courage, and acceptance with me. That was where it all truly began. The trust, the transformation, the journey into the self I had always kept hidden. I wasn't finished learning, I wasn't finished discovering, but for the first time, I was no longer afraid. I was no longer hiding. I had become the person I was meant to be, and nothing could take that away. The world outside remained the same, indifferent, sometimes harsh, sometimes dismissive, but it no longer mattered. I had discovered something far more precious, the unshakable truth that I belonged fully to myself, in every detail, every reflection, every secret corner of my being. And as I stepped into the sunlight that morning, I felt it, a quiet, profound joy. A freedom I had never known. A courage that could not be taken. Everything had begun with two simple words, spoken with quiet conviction, "Trust me." And in those words, I had found the doorway to myself. I had walked through it. And I would never turn back.